So we're ready to seal. To get optimal performance out of Ovation, I recommend 4 coats, and all coats are done exactly the same way. We use a spray bottle to apply the finish over a small area, and our foam roller to spread the finish out and to back roll any bubbles out to get a nice finish. Now, because we're applying Ovation onto bare concrete for our first coat, we have to apply more material because it's going to get drawn into the concrete. If we didn't, the concrete would draw, basically would suck in so much finish, it would dry out too fast, and we'd have probably roller marks or streaks or dark marks or something we don't want. So when you see me apply this, I'll be applying more product to the bare concrete for the first coat, just so that I can spread it out and even it out. All other coats, we use a lot less material because that first coat is our basically like primer. It seals the finish and lets all other coats flow out and give us really good quality surface. We're ready to seal. Here's our first coat. I'm going to put it on generously and spread it out as I go. The important thing is we don't want to let it dry out. So as we go, we want to keep it wet until we're done with it. Be a little generous. Spread it out. And don't get ahead of yourself either. Just take your time. I want to do my edges. You're going to use more finish on this first coat than you will on all other coats. You can always make extra because it has a long life. It's not like you have a pot life to fight against. So find working in sort of narrow sections that are about a foot wide are easy to manage. If I start spraying too far, it dries out too fast and then I'm chasing it. So just work in narrow sections. Blend the coats together. Don't go too far back. All right. You'll see a few bubbles here on the first coat, and they'll just disappear, so don't worry too much about them. And as you go, your foam roller is going to collect sealer. It's going to start holding more sealer. So you may not have to add as much. See how there's a little extra squeeze out? I'm using very little pressure to spread this. Just go ahead and use up what's in the roller. There. Just make sure there's no drips anywhere. As you can see, the water in the finish darkens the concrete. We need to let this dry about an hour, maybe a little bit longer if it's damp or cool, so that the darkness goes away. That's a sign that no more moisture is trapped under the finish. Although Ovation is very breathable, we don't want to put another coat on too soon because we'll just trap a lot of moisture and it will slow the cure down. So it's been a couple minutes since I finished the first coat, and you'll notice there are dark lines and light lines from rolling. All these will disappear, and the darkness is simply the water from the diluted finish under the surface. And that's all going to evaporate, and that's what we're waiting for. So once these disappear, that's when you know it's ready, you're ready to move on. Just so that you can see, the surface is already dry. It dries very, very fast. But we're waiting for the moisture that's still coming through the finish to evaporate, and the surface will lighten and even out over time. So often when you're putting a finish on concrete, you're going to get a little bit of dust in the finish. There might be the odd little bubble that leaves a rough spot. If you take your hand and move it across the surface, you can feel little peaks. And I like to knock those off between coats so that they don't build up and turn into something bigger than I'd like. And to do that, I use 1200 grit wet dry sandpaper. You can use 1000 grit, 1200 grit, 1500 grit, something really, really fine. I even find 800 grit is way too aggressive on this brand new soft finish. I'll take that sandpaper, just dry, put it on a sanding block. I use my diamond hand pads, and very lightly just go over the surface. All I'm doing is knocking off the rough stuff. That's it. I'm not making dust. I'm not sanding the surface. I'm just knocking those peaks off to where it feels baby bottom smooth here. And elsewhere where I haven't done it, I can feel just those little hint of a nib of dust or whatever. It's just very, very simple. And when I'm done, I just wipe it with a dry microfiber cloth, and I'm ready to seal my next coat. Okay, so it's been a little more than an hour since our first coat. We're ready for our second coat. I've done a very, very light knockoff of any dust. You saw me do that, so it's nice and smooth. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing as I did with the first coat, except I'm going to use less finish. So when I'm applying, I want to put down just enough to be able to spread it out into a nice thin wet layer with smaller bubbles, and then come in with very light pressure to knock down those bubbles. So you can see how there's some white bubbles there. Put a little extra material on, I'll push it forward. And the key to being successful with this is to work not super fast, don't get ahead of yourself, but you don't want to take so much time that it starts to dry out. You always want to have that edge nice and wet, that if you have to blend back into it, you can, and not have a roller mark. So now I'm just coming back in, and this is called back rolling. Just back roll very lightly, almost no pressure, nice and slow. You can see how the bubbles just disappear. I got enough in the roller to do that last little bit right here. Just come in, take my time, no pressure, and finish up the edges. Done. So right after spraying, as I'm spreading it with the roller, I'm pushing down with a little firm pressure. You know, just squeeze out the roller, get good contact pressure. But then when I'm back rolling, I'm using almost no pressure, just the weight of the roller, just to very lightly spread and break those bubbles. So here's a little bit more pressure, a little bit firm pressure. You know, the harder you push, the more foam you're going to make, so I don't want a whole lot of foam. And then it's just very light pressure to back roll and knock down those bubbles and spread it out. And I'm looking for the whiteness of the bubbles in the sealer, and they disappear and turn clear when they're gone. Make sure I do the edges. Okay, I'm done.